Welcome to a special episode of Ability Assistance. My name is Phyllis Jones, Chair of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance.
My name is Stacey Leibowitz, and I am the Secretary for the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance.
Our guest today is Congressman Seth Moulton. Welcome, Congressman.
It's great to see you, and it's great to be with two people who just do such important work for our community. So thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for being here. This is a special episode this month. We'll be doing our normal taping later this month, but thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know your time is limited, and there's been a lot of going on Capitol Hill these days recently, but focusing on disabilities, what's been going on lately? What can you tell us that's been pending, that's been working around committee, that you see getting a lot of steam out there?
Well, we all know that Capitol Hill is fairly dysfunctional right now. We're having trouble just keeping the government open under our current Republican leadership. But at the same time, there is a real bipartisan coalition that supports work on these issues. And a lot of people come at this from personal experience. That's part of my story. My uncle was very close with, had Down syndrome, and growing up, he was just part of the family. And so I became accustomed to working with someone with some significant mental disabilities, but also recognized just how unbelievably impactful he was on our family, on his community. When he sadly died a few years ago, hundreds of people showed up at his funeral, hundreds of people that we didn't even know whose lives he touched. And so that animated in many respects my work on this issue in Congress. And people across the aisle can tell similar stories. And so while there's so much partisanship in Washington, there is some real bipartisan work happening behind the scenes on these issues. So if you want, I can tell you a couple of examples of some of the things we're working on.
That would be fantastic, especially I know Stacey and I have been doing a lot of focusing on what's called silent disabilities, the PTSDs, the anxieties.
Sure.
All kinds of mental health
All kinds of mental health, especially that's come out of COVID, those silent disabilities that have been lacking focus, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
Well, I mean, maybe I should just start there, because a few years ago, I decided to share my own story of dealing with post-traumatic stress, coming off of 4 tours in Iraq as a Marine infantry officer. It was something that I had kept hidden for a long time, especially going into politics.
Yes.
You know, many of us know the long, sordid history of people being drummed out of public life for disclosing or having disclosed on them any mental health issues that they've dealt with. I not only dealt with post-traumatic stress, but I even got help for it, something that should be a good thing, and yet in politics at the time was seen as a potential death sentence. So I kept it hidden, and then I decided that's not leadership. Leadership is leading by example. And so I shared my story of dealing with post-traumatic stress, and that opened up my work in so many ways on mental health issues. By the way, I choose to call it post-traumatic stress because, as a very good friend in the Marines said once, Seth, after what we went through, it would be a disorder if you weren't affected by it. And I think it's a very good point, because regardless of the nomenclature, people need to understand that these kinds of issues are in fact normal human reactions to terribly stressful, traumatic events. So we need to get to the point where these things are normalized. But let me get to some of the legislation that we're working on too, because there's some good stuff going on behind the scenes. One thing that I've been working on for years now is the Heads Up Act. The Heads Up Act would designate people with developmental disabilities as a medically underserved population. Now, this is a technical term in healthcare, but what it does is it opens up more than 25 government programs to the intellectually disabled and developmentally disabled communities. This, for example, federal funding for health centers and public health infrastructure, such as federally qualified health centers, access to medical school loan repayment, resources, preferences in federal resources, in federal research. These are all things that a clearly disadvantaged population is not getting. the medically underserved designation was created back in 1996. And the criteria for determining someone to be a part of this population is that the ratio of primary care physicians to the population, the infant mortality rate, or percentages of people with income below the poverty level, designate them as medically underserved. So it's pretty obvious that that a lot more people should be qualified by that designation, and it hasn't happened yet. The Heads Up Act, a bipartisan piece of legislation, would change that. We also do.
If I can
So go
interject,
ahead.
would this be covered under the Americans with Disability Act umbrella as well?
Well, it's not right now,
But are you looking for that to happen, basically?
Yes. Well, this particular piece of legislation wouldn't address that directly, but there are some things that we are working on that fit right into that. For example, the Air Carrier Access Amendments Act, this has 41 Democratic co-sponsors, updates what's called the Air Carrier Access Act to address barriers to travel for people with disabilities, especially people using wheelchairs. So I mean, we've all seen passengers get on and off planes with wheelchairs.
Yes.
It turns out that it's not always that easy. It doesn't always work the way it's supposed to, and a lot of people don't fly and therefore don't travel because they don't think they can get on a plane. So that's an example of something that fits squarely into the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I would like to kind of piggyback on the first legislation that you were talking about concerning developmental and intellectual disabilities. You talk about physicians and the ratio to individuals who need services. One of the other issues that, especially after COVID, has become very, very prevalent is staffing for supporting people with disabilities. I think
And the lack thereof.
The lack of it. I've worked in the disability industry for about 20 years, and there was always a staffing problem because of pay and support. And so this is another area of where people are underserved. Would this legislation address any of that, or are there other pieces of legislation that are being looked at to address that concern?
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I mean, in many ways, the fact that the Heads Up Act is out there is because people with intellectual disabilities are not actually getting the health care that they need, because, as you say, there aren't enough people working in that space. The Heads Up Act that I just discussed, in some ways addresses that indirectly, maybe not directly, but addresses it indirectly by making sure that federally funded health centers, and other programs like that, research programs, are open and available to this population. I'm also sending a letter to the FDA and the NIH, and that's the National Institutes of Health, urging them to collaborate with organizations that represent people with Down syndrome to increase awareness and participation in research. It turns out that a lot of diseases are more prevalent in this population, and yet a lot of people with Down syndrome can't get access to any of the studies meant to address these diseases. So they're being cut off from experimental treatments, things that could really make a difference in their lives. And the rest of us are not learning from the connection, the very clear statistical connection between many of these diseases and Down syndrome. So, for example, adults with Down syndrome have a 90% lifetime chance of developing Alzheimer's. This happened to my uncle. 90% chance. And so as individuals with Down syndrome reach their 30s and 40s, which didn't happen 30 or 40 years ago, nearly all will begin showing signs of amyloid plaques, the tau tangles, the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, if you know anything about that horrible illness. And so we need to understand what's the connection here. I mean, maybe by understanding why so many people with Down syndrome develop Alzheimer's, that's the key to unlocking a cure to Alzheimer's. But
I was just thinking that it could flip in the other direction as well, and not only assist those with Down syndrome, but actually help us unlock the diseases of Alzheimer's and dementia.
No, that's exactly what I just said, right? If we got to
Yeah.
understand this connection, it might in fact help us finally crack the riddle of this disease. There's another interesting issue that again resonates with me because of my uncle's experience. One of the ways that he met so many people in the community was he was a bagger at Stop and Shop. And met an awful lot of people there, and it was a good job for him. He did well at it. He got paid. But there's this issue right now, which means that which says that currently individuals who are receiving Social Security disability benefits are limited to $2,000 in assets. So if they actually save enough, which we all should be doing, right? We should be saving money. If their bank account even temporarily dips above $2,000, their benefits are suspended and then they're eliminated from the program. I mean, talk about a terrible incentive. You know, go out and spend the money recklessly that you're making, but don't save it because then you get in trouble and it gets taken away. That's really problematic. The last time that this was updated was in 1989, which I guess median rent back in 1989 was around $450. Today it's $2,052. So in other words, if you're just saving enough money to pay next month's rent, you're gonna get kicked out of this program. That's crazy. And so the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act, with 13 Republican and Democratic co-sponsors, would aim to do that. So, look, that's a flavor of some of the things that we're doing in Congress now. All the things I've talked about are legislation that's being worked on by people like myself and other leaders for the disabled and developmentally challenged communities here in Congress, but they haven't been passed into law yet. And so a lot of people will hear about this and say, what can I do? Be an advocate for this legislation, because we need to get more colleagues in Congress to sign on. If you look up these bills and see that your representative or your senator is not signed on and supporting this legislation, please call their office and encourage them to do so. The more co-sponsors we get, the more likely we'll actually be able to get it passed.
Because this program does technically have a nationwide reach once it's put out on YouTube and it's on the Cablecast app, maybe your office can send me the legislative numbers so we could put that out there.
Love to.
And we can, when we post it to our Facebook page, we can say, you know, and here's the legislation that the congressman spoke of. So when it's out there, people can see this, and maybe if somebody in Utah watches the program, they can contact their congressman, congresswoman, or senator out there.
No, that's absolutely right. It's so important. It's very important for us to hear from our constituents. And so many people are watching this, chaos in Washington, the bitter partisanship, the deep divisions, and saying, this is awful, but what can I do to help? Well, here's a very practical thing that you can do to help our communities, to help our nation, to help medical research all around the globe by opening up these programs, by sponsoring this legislation, by getting it passed to really make a difference in people's lives.
And these are one of those types of issues that I like to sit back and call, it's a no-brainer, because it's a nonpartisan type of an issue. You know, who doesn't want to help people who have Down syndrome, for example?
It's across the board, and I think with the Down syndrome piece, to Seth's comments, that this could have far-reaching implications in the most positive way. And with SSI, I think, I have a younger sister who is on SSI and is impacted by this. This has been a long-term problem.
Yes.
And I think, having parents and family members and even people themselves who are affected reach out.
Yeah, and you're talking about also minimum wage. Now, I mean, I was working for the federal government on co-op in 1990, and I was earning minimum wage, and I think I was earning like $7.25 an hour as a co-op student working for the Coast Guard. And that was in 1990. And now, granted, minimum wage is set by the state, but I think minimum wage right now in Massachusetts is $15.25.
Something like that. It's not bad comparatively.
Comparatively, I mean, it's not a living wage.
No, that's right. I mean, some of this stuff is about really important new initiatives that we need to take. Some of it's just about simply keeping up with the times. So
Yes,
there's a lot of work to do, But thank you so much for having me on. It's been an honor to be here and talk about such important issues. And thank you again to both of you for all the work that you do for our community.
Thank you for
thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you, we really
Okay.
appreciate it.
You can contact Congressman Moulton's district office in Salem at 978-531-1669. You can also reach his Washington, D.C. office at 202-225-8020.
Thank you to our crew today.
Join us later this month where our guest will be the Institute for Human-Centered Design.
Yes.
And we tentatively, as of today, have State Senator Bruce Tarr scheduled to appear in February. I think we're gonna start calling it the annual Beacon Hill episode with Senator Tarr.
He's a repeat. He
Yeah,
always
exactly. Oh
repeat
my God,
visitor.
anytime we say please, he comes.
Yeah,
and
we can always rely on him.
We can always rely on Senator Tarr. March will be joined again by Waystone to talk about their employment programs. We didn't get to that when they were here last time. We're still looking to book May. We're still looking to book April.
Right.
In May, we'll be joined by State Representative Adrian Ramos. And then rounding out the 2023-2024 season. Oh my
Hard to
God.
believe.
In June, we'll be joined by Mass Rehab Commission, which will hopefully be known by then as Massability.
Massability.
Yes. We may be bringing other special tapings this year in order to accommodate some guests. I talked to Melissa. I know our town manager, I know she would like to come on
That would
and
be
talk about
fantastic.
some things that we've been dealing with in town recently. So we're going to be booking some additional episodes to try to get her on because that's
It's
important.
incredibly relevant.
Exactly. We do also have commitments from several other guests that we're working on to secure dates for them as soon as possible, but they might actually be pushed out till next
Yeah.
season again.
Yeah, we're booking ahead.
Exactly.
Definitely.
We're consistently looking for new topics to explore here at Ability Assistance. We would truly love to know what topics you want more information about. If there are specific topics that you would like to learn more about, please email me directly at pjones@northandoverma.gov or call me directly at 978-494-0136. It eventually goes to my personal cell phone, I promise. And in addition to watching through your cable station, you can catch all of our programs on demand via YouTube, the Cablecast app through Roku TV, Apple TV. I just recently learned through the iPhone and the iOS platforms, North Andover CAM's website, and also we always roll out the podcast via Podbean. So from all of us here at Ability Assistance, thank you for joining us for our special episode this evening, and have a good night.